Hi there, and welcome to. I'm Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to Sevens with Ronin, which is a music show. I haven't done one for a while. As you may or may not know, I started a music channel as well, but due to the sheer time it would take to do music and films, I kind of dropped that. But this little show is an excuse to talk about music for a little while, and I'm glad to have the Bulgarian troglodyte again, who has been on before. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Teddy Barrett. Yeah, I just need to mention it every time.
Yes,
so, yeah.
of course. You maybe need to change your name to that. So,
Yeah.
so seeing, I think it's fair to say that both of us love Japanese cinema. So we thought for a change, we're going to talk about Japanese music, and we're each going to recommend or talk about 7 Japanese bands. As you may or may not know, there's an absolute boatload of Japanese bands, as well as Korea. Now, one of the things, if you are into physical media, it is quite hard or quite expensive to actually import them. So you have physical media, but there are just so many and so many genres, and sometimes so many genres just in one band. So hopefully we'll maybe get people to investigate and go down rabbit holes. I know YouTube is certainly an ideal place to go down Japanese music rabbit holes, as it is with cinema. So that being said, I'll let Bulgarian Troglodyte go first with his first choice.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start with a metal band. They're one of the most famous Japanese metal bands. It's D-Rank Ray, and they started in 1997, my year of birth, and they are still going strong. They've made like 11 albums and 3 EPs. So they are kind of a hard band to describe, as they do so many different things, but they started as a kind of an alternative rock, alternative metal band, and you can maybe even hear a bit of like grunge influence, then some heavy metal influence, then some gothic influence and things like that. But then later on, they've done also way heavier stuff that goes into like even like deathcore and things like that. So I actually went through the whole discography in the last couple of weeks, as I did like 30 hours of preparation for this podcast. Because with many of these bands, I had only listened to some of their albums, so I thought that this would be a perfect opportunity to go through all these discographies, and it took quite a while. But yeah, so I think D-Rank Ray is a band that they only made good albums, but some are obviously like 5-star albums, but many of them are like 4-star albums. And I think one kind of criticism I would have for them is that some of their albums are bit too long, as many of their albums are like 60-70 minutes long. I think they could cut a little bit of the fat, and their albums would be even better. And this is like a very rare metal band for me, as the vocalist is the highlight for me. I think for me, I like hundreds of metal bands, but it's very rare to see a band where the vocalist is the clear highlight. Usually for me, it's either the insane guitar player or the insane drummer, and the instrumentals in general, that is the highlight. But in this band, the vocalist Kyo is just so amazing. Like, he has tenor singing vocals, and then he can do like brutal guttural death growls, but then he can also scream. So he could basically be in a power metal band, he could be in a death metal band, he could be in a black metal band, and he can sing pop ballads as well. He has that kind of a range and insane stage presence, as I've seen some YouTube clips where they do these insane live shows, and I think he has even hurt his vocal cords many times because he sings in so many ways, so it's kind of understandable why that would happen. And then in terms of the instrumentals, we have pretty heavy guitars, but again, the early stuff is more like alternative metal, so it doesn't really get heavier than something like Alice in Chains, for example. But then in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you have those kind of heavy, very down-tuned guitars that sound almost as heavy as something like Meshuggah. So it really depends on the album. And they even have an album called Vulgar. So as a Bulgarian troglodyte, I approve of that title of the album, and it's one of their classics. But my introduction to the band, or proper introduction to the band, was Doom Sparrow, which was a 2011 album, one of their heaviest albums, and that's still my favorite. I think it's one of my top metal albums in general. But Deer and Grey was a band that I was also familiar with them as a kid, and I had listened to some songs, but it took me a while to get into the albums, and I only last year started listening to the full albums, and then now they are definitely one of my favorite metal bands. And yeah, I think if you like the heavier stuff, start with Doom Sparrow, but if you like maybe hard rock and kind of lighter types of metal, you could maybe start with the very early stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard of them and I have watched or listened to a few of their songs, but they haven't grabbed me yet, so I might revisit that. But I mean, you said they're hard to describe, and I think that's almost a commonality with quite a lot of Japanese bands, because they do kind of a little bit of everything, and there's some bands that can change that within the same song. And one thing we'll maybe get to is just the level of musicianship of these Japanese bands is just like ridiculous, because I think their education system actually puts resources into music. Because certainly for me, when I was at school, music class wasn't really taken that seriously, whereas I think in other countries around the world it's taken a bit more seriously. So even the basic level of musicianship in kids is pretty high.
Yeah, I think in Finland we have a bit of the same thing, and we produce lots of classical music people, even though we are a country of 5 million people. So we have lots of mandatory music classes in school, but obviously with Japanese people, it's both the culture, but also the work ethic that again, the people are willing to put 8-10 hours a day into music. And if you hear stories from lots of Japanese artists, whether it's manga artists or whatever, that they work basically 24/7. So obviously your craft is gonna be good then, but it's not very healthy for your life.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all know kind of sometimes the punk bands in the 70s and perhaps the hair metal bands of the 80s, musicianship wasn't perhaps the highest order of the day, but certainly even Japanese punk bands are the musicianship level is pretty high.
Yeah, I have a couple of those on my list. So yeah.
Yeah, so for my first choice, I'm not actually going to go with metal or rock, surprisingly. I'm going to go with a band that, again, is fairly hard to describe, but I suppose they're more kind of electronic with a bit of rap. It's just two girls, because I think they did start when they were just in their late teens. It's charisma.com, who I think they were 2007 to maybe 2015. They went on hiatus because one of them gave up to go back and help her family business, which again is a very kind of Japanese thing to do. So that I think they maybe only get 3 or 4 albums, and you can tell by that cover the kind of characters they are. If you want to check out their videos on YouTube, they are hilarious, especially for the video for Hate. It's absolutely hysterical. But again, it's very electronic. One of them is an MC, one of them is a DJ officially. But again, they're very unpredictable. The songs don't necessarily go the way you think they're going to go. But they're just very, well, they put a smile on your face, put it that way. And again, as we know, in these dark times, putting a smile on your face is highly valued. So I don't know whether they might come back at some point because they're still relatively young, but we'll have to wait and see. Again, like quite a lot of the physical media I'm going to show, it's quite hard to get and quite expensive. But every now and again, Amazon, you will actually get a seller. And you can also use Amazon Japan, who actually ship stuff to the UK pretty quickly. So they're a good fun band, but again, they're my first choice. I've kind of did mine in a ranking, but it's doesn't really matter that much because they're all well worth checking out.
Yeah, I didn't rank my choices. I'm really bad at ranking music. Although when you said that you are gonna do the top 100 artists, I've been thinking that maybe I'll do a response to that, but it might be impossible because I cannot even rank my top 10. Yeah,
it's hard work.
I mean, I think it's easier like within a genre, but when you listen to almost all genres of music, it's so hard. Yeah.
So what's your next choice?
Yeah, so it's something completely different. It's actually like singer-songwriter folk stuff. So it's this female singer-songwriter Ichiko Aopa, who's actually very popular in the West these days, and her albums have been really critically acclaimed here in the West too. So she's quite popular, but it's really hard to say kind of how many albums she has done because she has done so many different things. But she has kind of done maybe like 7 like normal studio albums, but then she has done like collaborations and soundtrack work and several live albums as well. But I've listened to only the quote unquote normal studio albums, and I like all of them. But it's pretty easy to describe her music. It's just basically acoustic guitar and her angelic, very ethereal voice. So it's really beautiful, very kind of relaxing stuff, and it works both as kind of active listening, but also very well as like background listening to when you are like studying or doing something like that, as it has that calming effect. But later on, she has also added a bit more like other layers to her music, like in her last album, which I think is her best album, Windswept Adan from 2020. Like there are some other instruments there, and then she has like some nature recordings there, so it sounds very kind of natural and peaceful in that way. And again, her voice is just so beautiful, like you just want to kind of close your eyes and listen to it. And she started in 2010, so she's been doing music for around 15 years now, and she's releasing constantly like lots of stuff, and even again, like I said, doing some soundtrack work. I think she did a soundtrack for some movie a couple years ago, and even video games and stuff. So she seems to be like very popular, like both in Japan and also in the West. I think she even did a soundtrack for one of the Zelda games, which is obviously a really huge thing, considering how popular they are. And by the way, as a side note, like video games was like one of the things that got me into Japanese music as a kid. Like, for example, there's this video game series called Dynasty Warriors, which is about China, but it's a Japanese game series, and that's kind of where I heard lots of cool like Japanese metal music as a kid. And so the fascination for Japanese culture for me started very early on, and now it's going stronger than ever. But anyway, Ichiko Aopa is somebody who I think I can recommend to almost everybody, as it has that kind of wide appeal, I think.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. Yeah, I'm interested to see what kind of crossover we have, but we could have no crossover whatsoever, and it wouldn't actually be a surprise just because there's so much variety. As I was saying to you in the green room, there is a YouTube video that's got like 300 Japanese bands to recommend. So we might not have any crossover whatsoever. For my next choice, I'm actually going to pick a band that I don't have any physical media for. This is the struggle sometimes with Japanese music. Recommended to me by a friend who's also into Japanese music. And it's Drops, but with an apostrophe after the P. So they belong to Drop. Again, some of the Japanese band names are a little bit strange. And again, it is another band that it's hard to figure out how many albums they actually have or had. They've been on the go since 2009, but I think they have ceased to be as well. I think at one point it was 3 females and a male, and I think in their later years it was all female. Very much kind of indie rock, nothing too heavy. They have the odd heavier song, but it's more just again another great voice, and it's more just nice, calming, cheery, which might be a bit of a surprise considering my channel, but nice kind of cheery music, even if they're not singing about cheery things. I should say most of the bands in this list actually sing in Japanese, but I'll let you know which ones sing in English. But the majority of the ones that I have actually sing in Japanese, strangely enough. Just a very kind of happy, well, sounding happy and upbeat, even if they're not actually singing and happy, upbeat, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think Japanese are the best at doing indie rock. I think they do it so well. Like the great vocalists, and they just have this knack for melody and everything. So yeah. I have some indie rock bands here as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of them, they seem to release like EPs with like 2 tracks or 3 tracks. It's actually quite difficult to figure out what is counted as an album and what's not counted as an album. And certainly, you know, All Music, for example, the website, you can look up, they haven't quite caught up with the sheer Japanese invasion of kind of Western culture through the internet and Japanese music being more accessible. So sometimes it's harder to kind of track down exactly what they've released and what they haven't released.
And sometimes many of these are even hard to find on streaming services, not just on physical media. You often have to go to YouTube, and then sometimes those albums can be taken out of YouTube as well. So it can be hard to find this stuff in good quality as well. So
yeah. So what's your next choice?
Yeah, so next one is like a hardcore punk band. They have a very small catalog, so easy to listen to. So they're called Think Again. So English name, but the albums are sang in Japanese, and all of these have been in Japanese so far. But there are some that sing also like with both Japanese and English. But because you like often even in like anime soundtracks, you hear the songs and they like use some English words here and there, but most of it is in Japanese, so it's also interesting. But yeah, this is pretty basic like hardcore punk, but Japanese hardcore bands often add like those kind of heavy metal solos in there. So you can see that it's better musicianship than with like American and British punk bands usually. And I'm actually not a big punk fan in general. I really hate the like early punk rock stuff. Like it's just so boring, like Ramones and that stuff. Like two power
I've
chords.
never understood the Ramones, to be honest.
Yeah. And then some like middle class suburban idiots like complaining about politics that they don't know anything about. Like, but anyway. But Think Again is really cool. Like very heavy hardcore punk, and it's a trio. They have really good chemistry, and it's all like just constant kind of blasting in your face, and the vocals are quite harsh, but obviously not as harsh as like with metal bands. And they only have like one kind of full-length album called Never Again, and that's the one I've been listening to a lot lately. It's really good with cool like black and white cover as well. And then they have like a couple like really short EPs. I listened to one of them yesterday, Progress for Future, which was very good. And they even have one like EP with like some Finnish hardcore punk band. So I'm gonna listen to that because often these punk bands do this kind of albums where like 2 bands kind of collaborate and one band does like 3 songs and the other band like does 3 songs. So that's the case with this one as well. But they are very energetic, pretty kind of cookie cutter hardcore punk, but just really well written and performed.
Yeah, sounds interesting. For my next band, again, it's another band that doesn't exist anymore. The top four actually still do exist, though. It's another trio, because I do like my power trios. This is Chat Monche, which is obviously probably not the way you pronounce it. And again, this is an all-female band, again, more on the indie side. As if you can probably tell from the back, it's more kind of the indie. But again, it's just sing-alongable, lots of fun. This one is a CD and a DVD, so you do get live footage as well. Again, perhaps nothing genre-defining or life-changing, but it's just really sing-alongable, and again, just delicately composed little indie, I guess, pop rock songs, which again will just put a smile on your face. Don't worry, I do have a couple of bands that won't put a smile on your face, so don't worry, it's not all going to be happy-go-lucky choices from me. But again, quite hard to get on physical media, but there is stuff out there if you go looking hard enough.
Yeah, so far I haven't heard of any of your choices.
Yeah.
I'll have to check them out. So
yeah,
I tend to like I said, Japanese indie stuff, so I will probably like those bands. So.
Yeah,
especially the female stuff, female vocals. I usually tend to prefer female vocals in most genres, except maybe metal and hip hop. But with those genres, the case is that there just aren't many women, so they might be better if it was a bit more equal in terms of numbers. But yeah. But anyway, my next band is probably the craziest one. So it's this like art punk band called Midori. They were from like 2003 to 2010, 3 albums, 2 EPs. And it's like punk mixed with jazz. So it sounds like absolutely crazy, like this very tight punk guitars and punk attitude. And then it has this crazy jazz piano on top of it. And the female vocalist is absolutely nuts. She kind of reminds me of the punk girl from Kamikaze Girls in a way, with the attitude. Like she can scream about destruction and stuff. Again, the screaming is not metal screaming, but punk screaming, so it's a bit different. But then in some moments, she sounds like a schoolgirl, like talking about her crushes and stuff, like that kind of happy anime stuff. So it has all of that kind of big dynamic from like very rocking hardcore punk to very happy sounding indie stuff. And they are all like really insane musicians. Like the piano player he could play in any jazz band. At least it sounds like that. But also the rhythms and everything are very tight and very intense. So this is such a fun and very unique band to listen to. I cannot really think about another band that sounds like them. Maybe from the UK, there's been like in the last few years this like fairly popular band called Black Midi that does kind of mix of punk, jazz fusion, and prog. Like that's maybe the one band that has a bit of a similar vibe, but they aren't as crazy as Midori. And their second full-length album, Aratame Mashite, Hachime Mashite, Midori Desu, like that's my favorite one, and that's their most popular one. And it has this song called Yukiko-san, which is probably their most famous song, and that's like a good example of like their style. So if somebody wants to check out one song, definitely check out that one. And the albums are fairly short as well, like 30-40 minutes, and then the EPs are like 16-18 minutes long. So, and that's like perfect for this type of insane music. It would be a bit too much if it was like 70 minutes long. But very talented band, and too bad that they quit in 2010, because I think it would have been cool to see other albums from them, as they had such a great sound. But this is like definitely one of the biggest recommendations out of this list. They're just such a great band.
Yeah, I've heard the name, but I haven't actually investigated. I think the next one's possibly the most famous one outside of Japan. It's Church of Misery. And again, this is a trio, a power trio. They've been around since 1995. The bass player, singer, is the only consistent member. They haven't had that many albums. I think I've got a couple albums coming in the post, including the wonderfully titled Thy Kingdoms Come. They're doom, so lots of Sabbathy, fuzzy guitars, but pretty much all their songs are about serial killers or death. So we've got Houses of the Unholy, which is obviously a play on Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy. So you have stuff on Richard Speck and Charles Starkweather from Badlands. Strange enough, the song's called Badlands. So really fuzzy guitars. The bass player has the lowest bass you'll ever see. It's pretty much on his shoes. Doug Pinnick from King's X has a low slung bass. There's plenty of other people. Ben Shepherd from Soundgarden's got a low slung bass, but the bass player in Church of Misery is ridiculous. It's literally on his shoelaces. So we've got, and then there were None, which again has even got a Harold Shipman song, Dr. Death. So again, you could say it's in poor taste or whatever, but it is also kind of darkly funny. Their latest one, which I think actually came out the last couple of years, is Born Under a Mad Sign, and you can certainly get that on Amazon. Again, there's highlights in David Koresh, which is from Waco, and that's entitled Come and Get Me, Sucker. And there's one in the Beltway Sniper, which happened in Maryland, I believe, and obviously that one's the obvious Master Brutality from Black Sabbath's Master Reality. And we've got Ed Kempfer from Mindhunter, and congratulations on actually, we're now going to get season 3 of Mindhunter. There's one about Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, and Master Brutality is about John Wayne Gacy, because you'd have to have one about John Wayne Gacy. And Green River Killer, and on the back there's a nice message of we hate trend, we hate corporate attitude, we hate the word stoner, death to false stoners, let there be doom. So again, it's a heartwarming message. So they're a lovely doom trio that sings about serial killers.
Yeah, I think I've heard you mention them in some other video, so I remember hearing about them, but still need to listen to them.
Yeah, if you like big, dirty, fuzzy riffs that probably last way too long when they should, they're wonderful. They do sing in English, but he's not the best singer. I think he's possibly been smoking some wacky backy, the devil's lettuce. So he does have a very kind of gravelly, but that kind of goes with the music anyway. So Church of Misery, absolutely fantastic.
And I like Black Sabbath, so it would be cool to see that that album that had that Black Sabbath Masters of Reality cover.
Let's get Sabbath all over their stuff, really. So.
Yeah. But yeah, so my next one is more like indie rock, post-hardcore stuff. So it's Mass of the Fermenting Dregs. Although I think they also have like a Japanese name, but that's the translation. It sounds pretty ridiculous. Like many of these bands have such a ridiculous names when they're translated into English. I think they probably sound way cooler in Japanese. But they have 5 albums. The albums are usually quite short. Like their second album is my favorite one, called The World Is Yours, and it's only like 22 minutes long. But it's a band and also a trio again. So there are so many Japanese trios, but we have female vocals. Then this nice like indie rock guitars with lots of great melodies and very tight rhythms. And they are really good at writing like clever hooks and very catchy songs. So they are very much fun to listen to. But there have been like couple tracks where the riffs sound almost like metal, like kind of like that Black Sabbath level of metal. So they do experiment with their style as well. And usually their songs are quite short, but there are a couple like 10-minute songs as well, so they like to experiment with that too. And they are a band that again sing in Japanese, but they also play live in the West, so they are a fairly popular band, I think, at least in the kind of music nerd online circles. Like they are one of those bands where I think the YouTube recommendations have helped them a lot, because you can see the albums, like they have millions of streams on YouTube and stuff. So, and when you look at the comments, like, I'm glad that the YouTube recommendations recommended this to me. Like that's the good rabbit hole for this type of stuff. But I would especially recommend the first 2 albums. They are the best, but also the last 3 are still like good 4 out of 5 indie rock post-hardcore stuff. But yeah, great female vocals, really good melodies and hooks, and really fun band to listen to, and I think quite accessible and something that many people could like.
Yeah, I have heard the name. Yeah, sometimes the algorithm actually brings up something good. So it's not always terrible. Yeah, there's something about trios that are just fantastic.
Yeah.
Right, so the next band is one of those bands that lazy reviewers like myself would probably say is just, it's crazy and they're mad, but it's true. It's Maximum the Hormone, which are nuts. So they basically go from kind of death metal to sweet pop to power metal to reggae, to pretty much all within the same song, which can be jarring and inaccessible, but somehow it works. And the thing that really makes Maximum the Hormone work, apart from their sense of humor, like this is their greatest hits 2011 to 2011, which only has 3 songs on it, is the fact they've really got 3 vocalists. So they have a guitarist who does the death metal-y growls and shouting. You have, I think it's the other guitarist that has the kind of mid-range, and then the female drummer does the kind of sweet poppy song, or the sweet poppy vocals, because again, all 3 of them are pretty much in every song almost. Again, they've got, I think there's a couple of videos on YouTube that have like millions of views because they are so ridiculous, including What's Up People. Again, very much like a lot of these bands have got kind of lots of releases with like 3 or 4 songs on them. So again, it's hard to tell how many proper albums they have. Again, wonderful imagery there. Again, it's got that typical Japanese humor that sometimes perhaps doesn't translate, but somehow still is universal, if that makes any sense. But again, if you know, some bands are criticized for just making the same song over and over again, or the same album over and over again, but certainly Maximum the Hormone sometimes make 3 different songs within a 2.5-minute song, but for some reason it works. Now, granted, you might listen to it and absolutely hate it, but if you like punk and hardcore and death metal and then strange little pop interludes, there should be at least something within a Maximum the Hormone album or EP or even song that you'll like.
Yeah, I've saved some of their stuff for a listen, because I remember you mentioned them when we did the death metal chat like half a year ago as well. So I probably will like them, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's lazy to say, oh, they're mad, but they are pretty crazy.
So the next band is actually my favorite out of these ones, and I consider them to be like probably in my maybe top 25 or something of all time. And I especially love their first 2 albums and their own EP, but it's this indie rock shoegaze dream pop band called Kinoko Teikoku. And that obviously sounds like a bit of a name, but I think it means like Mushroom something or something like that. But it sounds like a person's name, but it's not. But they have this kind of very beautiful ethereal sound. So like some Western equivalents for them would be like Slowdive and Cocteau Twins and bands like that. So we have this kind of very dreamlike guitars, and then we have this angelic female singer who has just such a beautiful voice. And this is one of those bands that, again, you want to just close your eyes and take it all in, because it's also gorgeous and beautiful and relaxing and just makes you feel good, even though I think it also has like a very melancholic sound and not necessarily upbeat sound. And they have 6 albums and again 1 EP. And the first 2 albums and then the EP are the kind of essential stuff. That's the more shoegazy dream pop stuff. But then after that they started slowly moving towards like more of a like pop rock kind of ballad type of thing. But those albums work really well as well, and they're good 4-star albums. But again, the first couple and then the EP are the kind of masterworks, I would say, and those I could listen to every day. Like this is the type of stuff that I love the most. Like, again, my favorite type of music is like extreme metal and then this type of stuff. And I think they have been like fairly popular in the West as well, because again, these types of genres have like a pretty big niche audience, like of at least like few million people who really love this type of stuff. And I think it has become more and more popular now, and many of the kind of older bands have been kind of rediscovered as this type of sound is something that people really relate to. But unfortunately, this band like disbanded 5 years ago. So the first album came out in 2012, and then they last album 2018, and then they toured after that. But now they have been disbanded. But I think the singer has been doing some solo stuff, but I haven't listened to that yet. But it's probably gonna be good, as she has such an amazing voice. But this is again a band that I could recommend to many different types of music listeners. And they mostly sing in Japanese, but they have some English lyrics. But the English lyrics tend to be like "love me, hate me," like that type of like very basic stuff. But it sounds so beautiful with her voice, so I don't really care what she sings about. But such a great band. And again, if I do a response to your top 100, this will definitely be quite high.
Yeah, sounds good. All like a bit of melancholy. Yeah, I'll definitely have to look them up. Next is the band that might actually be the most well known, and is certainly kind of breaking through. I think they've toured America recently as well. It's Love Bites, which isn't the greatest name in the world. Again, this is all female, and this is kind of power metal, a bit of speed metal, and good old fashioned rock and roll. Again, they kind of look like that, but their playing is just spectacular. I know people have a kind of idea about these all female bands, and they're kind of produced and built rather than kind of organically come together. But Love Bites, the playing is just absolutely spectacular. I mean, the singer can handle the mid to high is just devastating, but the 2 guitar players are just phenomenal. One is a shredder, the other one's kind of more classic. Not that she can't shred either, because she can as well. And it's just, they have that dueling guitar thing of like Judas Priest and Maiden, but their solos tend to be fairly blistering. That I believe they've only changed bass players through their time, but they are. I mean, I think we kind of have to mention Baby Metal as kind of the gateway band sometimes into this, the same way Metallica's Black Album was a gateway for people getting into metal in the early 90s. But Love Bites, for me, are even taking that on, and I think, as I said, they're kind of breaking into America, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But certainly the musicianship is just absolutely stunning. They're very hard to kind of rate their albums because they're really consistent. I can't actually think of a song that's even average. But again, because of the playing, the musicianship's just phenomenal. I still think the singer at times doesn't quite fit the music, but the music's just so good. Again, I think people have a little perception of what the music would sound like, the way they're dressed, but again, it gets to levels of speed metal and almost a little bit thrashy, but it is a kind of power metal base just with phenomenal playing.
Yeah, since you mentioned them in the video like a couple of weeks ago, I checked out some of their songs, and I liked it a lot, even though I'm not a power metal, kind of heavy metal type of metal. I mean, the only power metal band that I listen to regularly is the German band Blind Guardian, but for the most part, I don't listen to as much.
It's funny because I'm not really into power metal until I discovered Hammerfall, and I absolutely adore Hammerfall from Sweden. I mean, again, they're completely cheesy, and they're completely, but for some reason, they just make songs that make you want to wave your fist in the air and like become a Templar Knight. I mean, their lyrics are just ridiculous, but there's something they just know how to make sing-along songs. So again, I'm not really a power metal, but Hammerfall, I just absolutely adore. You know, they're just ridiculous.
Oh God, the nostalgia when you said that. Like, as a kid, like we were like 7, 8 years old, and we were like, "Hearts on fire, hearts on fire."
It's just ridiculous, but we make Sweden rock. That's just completely nonsense. But I think I've got all of Hammerfall's albums. They're just brilliant. But
what was that song? Last Man Standing.
Yeah, well, that's genius.
And Enemies Necessary.
Yeah.
But Hearts on Fire was the thing that we were just listening to all the time as a kid and playing video games and stuff.
But the thing is, their power ballads are just awful. Their power ballads are absolutely dreadful. But their normal stuff is just so good. But their power ballads are just awful. They're hilariously bad.
And it was weird for me as a kid because one of my friends looked like a kid version of the singer. And then he had the hair and everything. And then he was just singing the songs.
Yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah, might have to listen to it today. For nostalgia. But yeah, so my final choice before the honorable mentions is another kind of post-hardcore, indie rock, math rock type of band. It's called Ling Tosite Sigure. So I don't know how to pronounce that one. But they have made like seven albums. And it's this like very upbeat, very fast, again, kind of math rocky post-hardcore. And you can hear the kind of Mars Volta influence and At the Drive-In influence because, of course, At the Drive-In's like Relationship of Command is like one of the great post-hardcore albums and one of the ones that
absolutely
influenced like everybody. Like you see it always in the top 10s of the genre. So this is like very similar to that, especially in terms of the vocals. Like the male vocals sound very similar to the Mars Volta type of high vocals. But this band actually is another trio. But they also have a female singer, so they do a duet. But the male singer definitely does maybe 75% of the vocals. And he also plays the guitar. I don't know how he does it live because it's that crazy math rock instrumentation with like very fast, crazy rhythms and weird chords and lots of weird melody lines. But then he has to sing as well. And I think one criticism would be that all of their albums kind of sound the same, just a bit different production and like small differences. But then you at least know that if you listen to one album and like it, then you will like the other ones as well. So that's always the good thing. But the TK, who is the male singer and songwriter of this band, also has like solo stuff that I haven't checked out yet. And I think he also does like anime soundtracks and things like that. So I think he's like quite popular in Japan. I think even the streaming service Crunchyroll that streams anime, which is like really big service here in the West, like even interviewed him. So he seems to be like a really popular figure. And they also have like the odd kind of scream here and there, but it's not like screaming sections, but they like often like in the climax of the songs, when they kind of repeat a theme, they do it a bit more intensively, and then like one of the singers might scream like one of the sentences, and it kind of really adds to it. But it doesn't like, it won't bother anybody who doesn't like screams, because it's just a very little kind of icing on the cake. And the albums are also produced really well, that you really hear the bass and the drums are mixed really well, and they are very intense as well and pounding. But there's some like dynamics in the song, so it's not like all like freight train to the face, but there's some like chiller moments as well, calmer moments. But overall, it's all like very upbeat and very complex and fun and very like interesting listen, and I think it would fit for like exercising and stuff like that, because it's so upbeat and fast.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. Again, I haven't heard of them, so
yeah,
I think our crossover is possibly going to be nil. Again, the last one for me is my favourite, and very similar to your last one. You could argue that all these albums kind of merge into one album, because they do kind of do the same thing, but they're just awesome at it. So this is a band that's actually been around since 1987. So they're essentially as old as Testament, for example. It's Ninja Naizu, or the Human Chair. Their name comes from a selection of short stories, in Japanese, strangely enough, science fiction stories. So their music is very, or their songs, I should say, the actual lyrics, they're very kind of Lovecraftian, but they have an absolute ton of albums, as you'd expect. They're a power trio. They're very Black Sabbathy. The guitarist pretty much has, is it a Gibson Tony Iommi uses? They've pretty much got the same guitar. That's a collaboration video of like Hawaii rock that they did with another band. This is one of my favourite album covers of all time, even though I don't really know why. It's just the three of them sitting. But for some reason, there's just something really cool about it. So one of them is like looks like a 70-year-old professor. He's a guitar player. The bass player is the one with the monk makeup on, and the drummer looks a bit of a cross between Yakuza and Elvis. But for some reason, they just work. I mean, it's just riff after riff after riff. Yes, you could argue some of the riffs are a bit derivative, but it's just right up my street. Yep, I'm just going to keep producing Ninja Naizu CDs, and this isn't all of them. Again, I'm still missing a few. That's their latest album, which was 2021, so they'll probably do another one. Again, as I said, you could argue they're perhaps a little bit samey, but again, if it's up your street, you won't care that it's a bit samey. Again, they've got videos on YouTube. They're fairly longish. They tend to do like 5-6 minute songs, but it's generally just big fat riffs, lots of interludes, bass solos, drum solos, guitar solos. Again, they do have a couple of live DVDs and Blu-rays, but they're ridiculously expensive, like 80 quid on eBay, so I'm not going that crazy. But they've been around for a long time, but it's only maybe the last 5 years since kind of YouTube that they've started to become a bit more popular. You can see people reacting to their videos on YouTube. And again, YouTube was how I got into them. When I heard the first song, it was like, oh, power trio, oh, big fat riff. I'll have to investigate that. And then that was me down the massive rabbit hole. Again, are all the albums a bit samey? Yes, but they're just so good. It's just great music to air guitar to, because it's just big fat doomy Sabbathy riffs. And they sing in Japanese.
I remember you mentioned them in the video a couple of weeks ago as well.
Yeah,
that they are probably your favorite Japanese band, so need to check them out as well.
Yeah, Again, not as musically varied as some of the other ones, especially not like Maximum the Hormone or anything, but they just have a groove and they just stick in that groove, and it's just such an enjoyable one. So do you have honourable mentions?
Yeah, I think I have 6. And obviously there would be more and more, but I thought that we don't
Yes,
have to go
300.
through absolutely everything. So yeah. So the first one is actually the heaviest band out of all of these. Like it's called Viscera Infest. So it's kind of like grindcore, death metal type of thing. And I think that, at least based on YouTube comments, I don't know how accurate they are, but somebody said there, or many people said there, that the drummer has like kind of world record levels of speed in the drums, and he does blast beats, so they sound absolutely ridiculous when it's like literally like speed of light type of stuff. Like, and the covers are like so insane that they are often censored because they look so awful. Like one of them has like Jar Jar Binks type of head and then blood all over it and things like that.
Nice.
So it's a bit similar to Nails that you like, but it sounds a bit more brutal, and the production is like really awful. So it's kind of hard to sound, but it's hard to listen to, but it's kind of interesting just because it's so absolutely insane. And there are some live videos on YouTube, which is absolutely crazy as well, especially the drummer.
Any more, or you might as well just do all of them?
Okay, I'll do all of them. So the next one is called Lamp or Lamp. I don't know how they pronounce it in
heard
Japanese.
that, but I don't think I've actually heard them.
Yeah. So it's this kind of, I guess, modern version of the Beach Boys, basically that type of pop music. So like bit of that psychedelia and melancholia, but also lots of that happy kind of sunshine type of pop music, and it has like a duet between male and female vocals, and both of them have great vocals. And their most famous album is from like I think 2004 called Koipito E, and it has like some English title as well, but I just remember the Japanese title. But it's a really good like 30+ minute fun kind of sunny pop album. But I haven't really listened to their other albums, so I don't know how they listen or how they sound like, but yeah, I'm looking forward to going through their discography. I think many of their albums are quite highly rated, and they are still going. I think they released a new album last year, so they have quite a big discography, so much to check out. Yeah. And then next one, well, this I would have had in the 7, but I'm actually gonna talk about this with Altes in our next episode of my podcast, as Jess recommends. So it's this duo called Kikuo Hana. So Kikuo is this big kind of electronic producer from Japan, and Hana is Hana-tan, who is this female vocalist who has like a voice of an angel. Like absolutely love her vocals. They only made 2 albums, and they kind of mix electronic stuff, art pop, then kind of neoclassical dark wave, some soundtrack stuff, then lots of like horror element there, so they kind of sound a bit disturbing, that they could be like a horror soundtrack. And the lyrics, even though they're in Japanese, but I've read some translations, so they are very dark lyrics about like bullying and anxiety and depression and things like that, so lots of that to relate to. But the production is great, but the vocalist is the one thing that I love the most. Like she's one of my absolute favorites. She has such a huge range, and she knows how to express like pain and suffering so well throughout her angelic vocals. I was just thinking earlier today that you would kind of describe that she's like a fallen angel because it's angelic vocals, but you hear the torture and the anxiety there as well. So yeah, but
sounds great.
Such a great duo. And too bad that it's only 2 albums, but maybe they will come back. I think the first one came out in 2016, the second one in 2017. And the second one is the one that we'll talk about with Altes in a week from now. But then the next one is actually a film composer who might be my favorite film composer. So it's Joe Hisaishi, who worked with...
I've heard of him.
Yeah, obviously we are both big Kitano fans, and he did some of my favorite soundtracks ever for Kitano, for Hanabai and Kikuchiro, for example. But then he's also the most famous from the Studio Ghibli soundtracks like Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, and those are great as well. And then I've talked about this fairly unknown film called Chichuko's Younger Sister on my channel, which is an Obayashi film, and he did the soundtrack for that as well, which is great. And so many soundtracks that one could mention. My favorite might be the Kikuchiro one. It's just this really beautiful, like, piano soundtrack with great melodies. I love listening to that, whether I'm watching the movie or whether I'm not watching the movie. But yeah, such a genius composer. I think my favorite with Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, I just love this simplicity, even though they're not that simplistic, but they sound simplistic. Plus, they have that melancholy through them. So even though they're played kind of upbeat, you still have that melancholy aspect to it.
Yeah, it's so beautiful in Kikuchiro, for example, when the kid finds out that her biological mother like has a new family and stuff, and then we hear the score, and they are in the beach and stuff. Like, it's so great, and it fits that Kitano melancholy as well, like with her painterly, with his painterly visuals and stuff. But anyway, two more. So this next one is actually something that I listened to like a week ago for the first time. So it's this female artist called Miki Nakatani, or is it Nakatami? I'm not sure, but I listened to her album Shisei Katsu, and it sounds this kind of bit like Portishead type of thing, that those types of beats, and then great female vocals on top of it. So very kind of chill beats and that kind of art pop influence there, but also trip hop and things like that. So it's my type of music, that, yeah, interesting production and great female vocals. So that was a really good album, and I need to still digest it more. It might become a favorite. So
yeah.
Then last is, again, more of that kind of nails type of grindcore stuff. So it's this guy called Takafumi Matsubara, who was part of this grindcore band called Gritlink, which I think is an American band. So some of the members are American, but he is a Japanese guy in that. But he also made this solo album in 2019, which was, I think, like he wanted to honor like his friend who died. So he got many grindcore musicians from all over the world together, and they recorded quite a few songs. And it's just like, again, blast beats, really heavy guitars, and they have lots of different vocalists in there. But it's, again, like nails, that type of music, very short songs that blast you into oblivion, basically. But it's really fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, again, my choices are some that I've just recently picked up, so I didn't put them on the list because I haven't really digested them properly. But obviously I mentioned them earlier, but I mean, baby metal, I think, are fairly influential as far as getting people going down those rabbit holes. And again, when they came out, people thought it was a joke. But obviously they've stood the test of time, and they are probably the biggest kind of Japanese band to break into the West. Another one that I picked up recently is Hanabi, with a full stop at the end. There's quite a lot of Japanese names, band names, that have a full stop at the end. I'm not quite sure what the meaning behind that is. And despite the cover, this is kind of, I mean, I'm not really a metalcore expert, or what counts as metalcore and what doesn't. But again, this is more kind of punky metalcore, but with some pop in it as well. I think they've got a few albums, but obviously I just got this recently, so I haven't digested it completely, apart from it's a lot of fun. And then again, a couple that I showed quite recently in album pickups, Nemophila, which again are kind of, I'm not sure how to describe them, apart from, I don't know whether that's metalcore or exactly what metalcore is. But again, just elements of quite a lot of different things. We also have Asterism, which started as an instrumental band. Again, I think that was a trio with a amazing female guitar player, but recently they dropped, as the kids say, they dropped a song where there's actually vocals. Lucy 2, which is Lucy, T-O-O. Again, another kind of indie, lighter band along the lines of Drops and Chatmonchi. Another one is X Japan, which is probably one of the more famous ones in Japan, who started way back in 1982, tried to break America, but didn't quite work. And they're one of the first of those dress-up bands that I've completely forgotten the name of. That's a whole different genre in itself. And they lasted to 1997. But there's an amazing documentary, We Are X, which I've got the Mondo Steelbook of. And it's like Spinal Tap, but it's actually real life. So they had band members' deaths, and it's hard to believe the actual story of it. But it is true. So X Japan, again, a kind of glam, power metal of the 80s, but they did last in 1997 before another band member died, and then the lead singer, kind of starter of the band, just said, okay, enough's enough, because after he died, it was like, what's the point of carrying on? But their legacy still remains very much like the Druids and Spinal Tap. And if you want to see a really amazing music documentary, check out We Are X, because it is hilarious, but also tragic and sad at the same time.
Yeah, they were one of the main influences for Deer and Grey, I think. So it's the visual gay bands like that have those aesthetic, like weird aesthetic.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you've made it this far, you kind of realise we didn't have any crossover. And because there's just such a wealth of Japanese bands, and as I said earlier, there's a YouTube video with 300 bands to recommend from Japan, so you can work your way through that, as well as this video, because I'll probably dive into that at some point as well. I've tried to write down your choices, because I'll be investigating them as well. It's just a seemingly endless treasure trove, and very much like cinema, Japan and Korea just seem to be this fertile area for growth and investigation.
Yeah, I actually forgot one of my honorable mentions. Like, it's this indie pop band called Advantage Lucy. It's again stupid name, but
yeah,
like probably,
some of the
what they do is like really beautiful, upbeat indie pop. That's probably very similar to the many of the things that we have already mentioned, but I've listened to a couple of their albums and they are really good. They were a band like from the late 90s to like I think mid 2000s. So there are a few albums that are usually quite short. And one more thing I could also mention is that one method that I use to discover lots of Japanese music is like through their website Radio Music. And they have this chart function where you can put like search for Japanese bands. So you can put like Japan in, and then you can also put a genre. So you can look at only like Japanese art pop bands or death metal bands or metalcore bands. So that's how I've discovered many of these. But I've also used the YouTube method that when I've been listening to some Japanese album, then it recommends me another. And often times the albums are really good. So.
Yeah, and then you realise you've spent 5 hours watching Japanese videos on YouTube.
And Japanese artists are usually, they do like great live performances as well. So it's great to watch those videos, especially if there are like pro shot videos and like live DVD clips and stuff like that.
Yeah, and a lot of them kind of obviously go into, their personal lives and their backgrounds and videos like that. And I don't know about you, but most of them genuinely seem like very nice people, which you generally can't always say about musicians from other areas of the world. But they generally always seem like really lovely people as well.
Yeah.
But that's probably a cultural thing.
Yeah, obviously there's the culture of respect in Japan. I think they really respect their fans and stuff. So they are all usually very humble and kind and chill. So
yeah, and people don't talk on mobile phones in public transport and don't shout and yell in public transport, which makes a change.
Yeah, obviously my plan is to go to Japan like in the future when I have the money, because obviously it's gonna be fairly expensive because it's a 9-hour flight and everything.
Yeah, it's my dream to go to Japan as well, but I would find it very difficult to come back.
Yeah.
Maybe
well,
one
you
day.
can go to the forests and die there. So yeah.
Yes,
Next to Mount Fuji or something.
absolutely. Walk the same steps that Kurosawa did while making
or die like the main character in this film in the end, revenge.
Yes.
Fighting all the other samurai. And I watched this last night. It was really good.
Yes, that's a really good one. So have you got anything else to add apart from another 30 bands?
Well, I could mention just like, again, I got into Japanese culture like very early on, like I said. So again, video game soundtracks, anime soundtracks were the thing that kind of originally got me interested in Japanese music. And I'm just such a huge fan of the culture in general, like everything like Japanese film, manga, anime, music. I also have some literature on my backlog, so I want to read some Mishima and all those great Japanese authors as well. And again, like I said, hopefully one day I can visit and eat some ramen soup and hang out in Tokyo. And yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I think I've got the CD, the Seven Samurai and Hidden Fortress soundtrack, which is wonderful as well. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this chat. Thanks very much for coming on again.
Yeah, thanks for inviting.
We'll have to do it again, and hopefully anybody who has made it this far, perhaps this has piqued your interest to find out about some Japanese bands that might wet your whistle. So thanks so much for watching. Do you want to tell us where you can be found and where your denim jacket from Bob is hiding?
Yeah, yeah, I always go for these crazy names when we collaborate. It has become a tradition. Like this was something that came to me last night. I have such a weird
dream.
Yeah, and not in the dream. But I was listening to some of these Japanese bands actually, and then I chose it. But originally I was gonna be like Vulgarian Samurai or something like that, because it would have fit and the theme of the episode. But anyway, my YouTube channel is called Vulgarian Troglodyte, where I do solo content mostly about music and cinema. And then I have a bi-weekly podcast called SS Recommends, although the format has now changed a little bit. So from now on, you will get SS Recommends, like shorter episodes, Saturday to Monday every other week. So Saturdays, Sundays will be in-depth film discussions, and Mondays will be music discussions. So if you guys like art house films and sometimes some more stupid films like Conan the Barbarian, you should enjoy that podcast. And it's always good practice to also like try to analyze the films very deeply, because I don't often or not always do that when I watch films by myself and then not talk about them. But this is like good practice to do that, and then you kind of discover what makes those films so great when you have those in-depth conversations about them. But that podcast is the one thing I would recommend the most about my channel. But you can also see my solo content, and sometimes I even do like response videos to Solitary Ronin. It's a good way to farm some content to my channel. Don't always have to come up with my own ideas. So yeah,
it's always good. Yeah. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
My idea. It was my idea. So.
Yes, absolutely. It spurred me on to start Sevens again. Yep, thanks for coming on, and hope everybody enjoyed it. And we'll see you in the future. Bye.
Sayonara.